Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Take Your Chance podcast, whatever. And this time, I have a pleasure and really a pleasure to interview Renato and Luiz, both of them from Nubank. They will tell us what they do in a second. And the topic of our conversation will be Flutter at Nubank. Now, I will explain why I'm so excited in a moment, but maybe just a moment before, Renato, Luiz, would you like maybe to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you ended up in mobile development, and maybe my audience are mostly Android developers, so just let us know whether you are Android or iOS developer originally. Currently, you are Flutter developers. That's understandable. So go on. And by the way, please tell us about your roles at Nubank, what you do.
I'm a senior software engineer at Nubank. I have like 15 years of experience with software development, um, mostly of them with mobile development. I'm quite old, so I have started programming with Java Micro Edition. It's something that even doesn't exist anymore, but it was like very relevant at the time. Uh, and then like 4 years later, I've started with Android, developing stuff with Android, and like I faced all the phases of Android development, like just creating small applications, even a project like modifying the Android operational system. So, and then now I came to Nubank to join the Flutter team. I think that's it.
So you basically joined at Nubank as a Flutter developer.
Yes, I joined Nubank. They needed like people with a very good background on Android development, Android and iOS, to join the Flutter team. So that's why I came. I was like starting studying Flutter, and they thought it was a good addition for them to come here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Luiz?
So, I'm a lead software engineer at Nubank. I've been at Nubank for 5 years, and I'm a developer for 10 years, but my mobile career is only at Nubank. And as a surprise to many, I didn't enter as an Android or iOS engineer. I was a Windows Phone engineer back at the time. And as Windows Phone faded up and Microsoft stopped giving support to it, I moved on to be an iOS engineer. So I think 4 of those 5 years at the bank I spent working with iOS, and now also a Flutter developer.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Great. Awesome. Thank you for the background. And now please allow me to kind of explain why I'm so excited and why I wanted to talk to you guys. So I'm an Android developer originally. Well, not originally. I'm an Android developer. And there's this little unknown framework that gained some popularity, but actually I haven't considered it for like serious big mission critical projects. You might have heard of it, Flutter. So I kind of considered it, a very good choice for maybe simple applications for agencies who mostly deal with all kinds of like show some UI, go to backend, bring some data, render it on the screen type of applications. But about a month ago, one of the members of my newly launched community kind of pointed out, there's this huge like unicorn in Brazil called Nubank, which is like everybody use, and I'll use them too. And they actually adopted Flutter. So that was like the first my initial introduction to Nubank. I didn't know about you guys before that. And then I started, like, I just told myself, wow, that's interesting, because I work with financial fintech companies, right? With all kinds of startups and a little bit more major companies. And I know that usually fintech is kind of slow moving, risk averse. Fintech doesn't like very innovative, very edge technologies on the edge. And so here we hear about this bank, huge company by this point. It's not, I don't know if you call yourself startup, but it's like it's a huge company by this point. And you did adopt Flutter. But what amazed me the most, even more than the fact that you adopted Flutter, is that I started to read about you, and I contacted, well, not I contacted, but your engineering manager, right? We kind of had a discussion. Yep. Alexandra, right?
Yes.
So kind of had a discussion on Twitter, and he told me, like, did you see that? And he sent me a link. I will show it now on the screen, maybe. Let me share my screen. Share screen. Yeah. And so he sent me a link to your blog post, why we think Flutter will help us scale mobile development at Nubank. And that was very interesting post to read. I recommend everyone who kind of, well, it doesn't even matter if you consider Flutter or not. That's just a very nice post, very interesting post to read. But what really blew my mind is this. You performed a full-blown research and comparison of different cross-platform frameworks, and you compiled this amazingly detailed report, right? And it has these just beautiful graphs and charts. You know, I won't go over it. It will take some time, and I will let you kind of go over and explain maybe the main points and what happened there. But it's really an amazing piece of a report, and it shows such a mission-oriented and very attentive to details approach to evaluation of technology stack. So basically, we have these different vectors, and you evaluated Flutter, React Native, and Kotlin Native along every one of these vectors. You gave them a mark, a grade, basically, and then you kind of constructed this chart, and eventually you also reduced it to maybe a little bit less vectors, the main vectors that you considered important for your project. And eventually after that, you chose Flutter. So I saw that, I was just like, wow, that's amazing. That's like the best, that's probably the best evaluation of a technology that I've ever seen in all my career. Usually people just hear about some new hype technology, bring it on, and then deal with its consequences. And you obviously didn't follow this path. So I'm very curious to hear about, first of all, whether any of you have already been at Nubank when this evaluation took place, and then what exactly happened there, and how basically you ended up choosing Flutter from these three alternatives. Because as far as I understand, you tried React Native very seriously. Before you adopted Flutter, you used React Native. So kind of maybe just explain to us the entire process that led to Flutter.
Do you want to talk, Dubas?
I can take that one. So I was there when they are studying about these different technologies. Like, we've created a separate task force, like with one React Native engineer, one iOS engineer, and one Android engineer to do these studies, to be less biased towards one of the platforms. So they've created this task force trying to see, okay, what technology can we use to develop our application from now on the future, or anything like that. So that's when we started to came up with this idea. So in this task force, they conducted some studies. They tested with other engineers, and especially no mobile engineers. So like a backend engineer to see how he would fare with the technology, if he would learn fast, if he was able to develop a simple solution fast than others. So they've conducted all those studies, and we knew that this was happening. Like, at the time, I wasn't part of this task force. I knew that this task force was happening and everything that they were doing. I acted more as a consultant there.
Mm-hmm.
And then after all these studies, they say, okay, we have all these different technologies, and with the graphs and all the studies that they conduct, they say, okay, I think Flutter is going to be the best solution for our application on the future.
Yeah.
That was basically it.
So you basically Nubank took several technologies and then actually sat their developers who didn't know anything about any of these techs, and they kind of throw this technology at them and tell them, here, that's the requirement, and that's your new framework, go on. And you actually measured, right, how long it took, and you probably gained some feedback about whether it was documentation was good, and whether the framework felt natural, or the developers had to kind of wrestle with it. So that's basically what was the process back then, right?
Yes.
And Renato, do you have something additionally to share with us about this process?
There is one important thing to remember, is that like maybe this is a problem that happens for every company that's like that wants to hire mobile engineers. It's not that easy. Like finding good and like scalable mobile engineers is not like simple to do. And one point that we were considering is that imagine if you like scaling, growing like Nubank was, like with anger to create new features and always like waiting for the opportunity of getting the time of a mobile engineer, like an Android engineer and an iOS engineer. It was like very complicated. Like in adopting like hybrid platform would like help us a lot on make things done faster. So
Yeah, that's very interesting, because you kind of jump straight into one of the questions that I wanted to ask. And the question really concerned hiring developers, because, well, we as developers, when you need to write code, you kind of think about yourself, right? We like our technologies, and we can kind of argue endlessly about this framework is better than that framework, and this technology is better. Like, we're developers, we know that. But at the end of the day, when you adopt any technology on a project of a considerable size, right? Because if you have 2 or 3 developers working on your project, which I'm not saying that it's a simple project, it might be extremely complex project, but still you have just 2 or 3 developers working, then it kind of doesn't matter very much which technology you adopt, because you have just 2, 3 people. If they can agree that they like something, you throw it at them, or they take it, and whatever. And then if one of them leaves, you can kind of bring another one. But if you have 5, 10, 15, 20, and that's what you're saying, right? You were planning for
yeah,
scale developers, then this question becomes really problematic. It becomes something that goes outside of the domain of development. Now it's a business problem. So how do you attract enough people who know, who are familiar with specific technology, and how do you ramp them up? How do you onboard them? How long does it take before these people become productive? And then also, what will happen in 2 years or 3 years? I'm not sure what's your average, let's call it, time spent by a developer at a job. But I think what I think about when I think about the entire world, I think it's about 2 years. So every 2 years, people change places. So you can kind of expect that if you have 20 developers, then over the course of 2 years, you'll probably onboard 15 to 20 developers. That's something along these lines. And as you said, you looked at this point, you kind of evaluated that. But I would argue, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that at this point Flutter is actually a risk in this context. At least, maybe not at this point. Not let me correct myself. At this point today, Flutter is the fastest growing technology. I think even Kotlin, and I will be once again I'll be once again lynched on the internet. But I mean, Kotlin is a waste, and it rode its hype, but currently it's not hype anymore. Kotlin is kind of a mature technology, or maybe it's not very mature, but it's kind of mainstream technology. That's the name, and it doesn't grow anymore that as fast as it used to in the beginning. But Flutter is kind of like skyrocketing into the space currently. But 1 year ago, in 2019, when you actually did this comparison, it wasn't that popular. It was relatively new, and I think but the main application that was written in Flutter back then was this Hamilton application, which they promoted and advertised. And I don't actually think that it's a very complex application. Surely not as complex as a digital bank. I imagine you have very complex application. So could you please speak to that? How did you see Flutter back then, and how do you see it today in the context of attracting talents, onboarding developers, etc.?
So I think one of the things that we thought a lot back then is not only attracting other engineers, like engineers from outside the company, but it was a little bit more about making like backend engineers or other front-end engineers to also work on the mobile application, because we have a lot of backend engineers. Like the backend engineers are always the most part of the engineers side. So if you could bring up a technology that brought some of those engineers to also work on the application, that would help us a lot, because every team has a backend engineer, but not necessarily has a mobile engineer. So if those engineers that are on the product teams can start working with mobile, that even without making any hire, you would already have have a greater capacity of developing this product. So that's one of the things that we thought back then, because we still hire like native engineers. So I think in this sense we didn't change so much, but yes.
Okay, and this maybe brings us to the question of what portion of Nubank application or applications use Flutter today? Approximately, maybe you don't know the exact code line metrics, but just kind of a ballpark figure. Is it like 5%, 20%, 50%, or 100? Yeah, it's not 100.
Absolutely, it's not 100. We are not even close to that.
Okay. So
yes, I would guess it was something near like 15%. We have a lot of stuff new being done yet, so we are kind of trying to find time to redo everything that we had done on native. So like we are kind of trying to create new things, all of new things using Flutter, and trying to find time to like revisit everything that we have and migrate this to Flutter. So it's not an easy task. Like when we have an application the size of Nubank application, it's kind of very complicated. And as you said at the beginning of the conversation, like we have a lot of legacy code. Like we still have like Swift code, we have Objective-C code, we have Java code, we still have Kotlin code. We have like a huge feature still made in React Native. So, and then we decided to like add Flutter to this mixture. So it's not that simple to like stop everyone to do like new features and okay, let's migrate everything and then we can just go on. It's not that simple. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we are facing now, like creating all the platform necessary for all those different platforms to coexist in the same environment. That's our daily job. It's not that easy. It's not that fun, but it must be done.
Yeah, so it's a lot of dirty details that you don't usually hear them at marketing presentations. Yeah, for sure. I mean, working with legacy code is always challenging, and migrating to another technology, I would estimate that it's very challenging. And in this context, by the way, I'm very curious, and it's great that Luiz, you come from kind of iOS background, because for Android developers, let's say adopting Flutter is kind of easier. I think it's kind of more natural. It's Google product, and Google markets Flutter to Android developers heavily. And I think in some case, maybe even the documentation is more optimized for Android developers. So, and iOS developers, I don't know anything about what's going on there. Really, like very little knowledge. So my question will be, how iOS developers, you and other iOS developers at Nubank, see Flutter? Was there a big pushback against Flutter, and whether they feel comfortable with it?
So from what I know, we didn't have any pushback against Flutter. Like everyone is really anxious to start learning and start developing their features in Flutter. So this hasn't been a problem, at least at Nubank. I'm not saying that this won't be a problem in every company. Maybe there's other iOS developers that say, okay, I don't want to go there, I don't want to do this. But I think for me, that I already had that background of not only being an iOS developer, but also working in Windows Phone. I worked a little bit in Android, but so to me, this was a little bit more easy, because I've always thought about, like, why don't we have a technology that can work on all platforms, and so you can code only once and not twice every feature. That's something that I always thought about. So for me, it wasn't so much problem, and also for other iOS engineers at Nubank, it wasn't so a problem for them.
No iOS engineer stood up and say, guys, we don't like this Google framework. I find that difficult
No.
to believe. I'm just kidding. Okay, that's actually great, because as far as I know, I'm not into Kotlin multi-platform. By the way, we have a question about Kotlin multi-platform. That will be my next question to you. But from what I heard about Kotlin multi-platform is that one of the biggest challenges on big projects is to convince iOS developers to give it a try, because they like, okay, we have iOS, we have Swift, we know that, and now you bring this Kotlin Android stuff. So it's kind of like, there's this war between iOS and Android, and it's kind of sneaking Android, kind of pushing Android down iOS developers' throat. So it's really great that Flutter doesn't produce this kind of anti-reaction. This makes it much easier really to adopt it in companies that have both type of developers. But what do you really think about Kotlin multi-platform? And I will just preface that by saying that I shared the link to your blog post, and there's a link there to the detailed report that you produced, and it concerns Kotlin multi-platform. So I don't think you need to kind of repeat everything there. People who are interested can read that, but I will specifically add one tricky question. So in the report you wrote, maybe not you, but whoever compiled this report eventually, you wrote that one of the biggest reasons why you decided to go with Flutter was that it has cross-platform UI. So basically, Kotlin multi-platform, if you adopt it, then you still need to write two native UIs, one for Android, one for iOS. And today, we kind of know, it's not official yet, but it's kind of very probable that Jetpack Compose, the new UI framework for Android, we already know that it will be cross-platform. and I don't think it's a big stretch to argue that it will be so that it will also target iOS as a target. So it's clear that you couldn't know about this back then, and it's also clear that it will take another year or two until this thing will become stable, mature, tested, etc. So it's not something that you can even adopt today. It's like in a very early alpha right now. But I just kind of want to hear your opinion about Kotlin multi-platform, and going forward, let's say 2 years, assuming that Jetpack Compose will indeed become cross-platform solution that allows UI to run on both Android and iOS. I mean, not for Nubank, okay? Let's put Nubank outside of the picture, but in general, would you say, with your experience and knowing your evaluation results, would you say that it's something that will be comparable to Flutter, or still Flutter will be kind of a better solution for cross-platform development? It's a long question, sorry.
Being honest, I don't have much experience with Kotlin, like with Kotlin native. I've used like other hybrid platforms like Selenium. Oh my god, I forgot the name. The Microsoft one.
Xamarin.
Xamarin.
Yes, that's it. But I think that the main key for the question you did is like how ready the platform was when we had the necessity of take the
decision.
Yes, the decision. So I'm not saying that Kotlin native will not be like a very good solution. Like everything in software engineer, like there are like lots of possible approaches to solve a problem, and maybe Kotlin native would be the best solution for someone for a specific challenge. But today, Flutter, in my opinion, Flutter is like way ahead of Kotlin native. So one of the main like concerns that we have when we were deciding which platform we would adopt was like how the market sees the platform, how the market will support us in case of like what happened to Facebook. Like if they decide to stop taking care of the language, will the community like help us to keep this? So I don't think we didn't solve at the time that Kotlin native would be like as supportive as Flutter is being now, you know. So I think that's it.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I think that today Flutter is much more mature technology than Kotlin multi-platform, even though people do write production code in Kotlin multi-platform. But Flutter just had first of all, it had a head start, so that's for one, and also I think they kind of how do you call it, owned Android team at PR and developer relationships, because Android was always very lacking in this respect. So for years, developers complained that the development happens kind of internally at Google, and even though it's Android open source project, we don't see how it's developed. They occasionally drop it as the open source, but we don't know what they develop. We don't know what they work on. People wanted to contribute and they couldn't. And then Flutter teams come in and well, I won't go into my own conspiracies because I have some about what happens between Flutter and Android teams internally at Google. But it's obvious that Flutter team took some very good decisions in respect to how you engage developers community, how you build trust. And very recently, I just saw this outstanding technical document. So in Android, we have this thing called process dev. And when basically the operating system kills your application, and you need to save your state in order to keep it when the operating system decides to either restore your application or the user visits your application again. And the goal here is to kind of keep the experience of the user intact. So even though the application was killed, when user comes back to it, it's in exactly the same state as it used to be. And that's something, as far as I understand, that Flutter didn't haven't supported for a very long time. And it started to support it now, like maybe 2 months ago or something. And alongside this feature, Flutter team also published this very detailed, very deep architectural document. I don't know Flutter, but I went over this document, and it was so clear, so detailed, and I told myself, wow, that's what Android should have been from the very first days. If we are talking about open source and we are talking about being open with the community, that's the way to go. You kind of engage community on the most interesting, the most difficult technical topics. You don't spoon feed them. So in this context, Flutter got everything right, and now Android team actually kind of tries to catch them. They play try and catch, because we see that the Android libraries start moving to GitHub, and they like Android team start to announce that, hey guys, we have this this feature request and bugs, and if you want to contribute, we can help you. Like, we will help you choose one. So there's definitely something really good that, even though I'm not sure I will ever write Flutter applications, but I think the entire ecosystem already benefits from the fact that Flutter exists in some aspect. Okay, so that's a given. Now, one very interesting thing that you, Luiz, already told us is that you have many backend developers, and Nubank would like to engage them in mobile development as well. And I imagine that's why you adopted React Native in the first place, because this was something really popular mindset in the React Native community. When you have, let's say, front-end developers who write in React, or even in any other JavaScript framework, or you have backend developers who write in Node.js, then it kind of sounds, I'm not sure it worked out as they expected it to be. Maybe it sounds a little bit more optimistic than it's in practice, but at the very least, that was the big promise of React Native. You can write your cross-platform UI, you can write your cross-platform applications, you can engage, you don't need kind of dedicated, or at least you need less dedicated mobile devs, whom, as we know, kind of difficult to find. But as far as I know, your backend is not written in any kind of JavaScript. And maybe that's not a question to you, that's maybe a question to Alexandra, but maybe you can comment on that. So if I understand that correctly, Nubank used Elixir and Clojure. Is that correct?
I think that's only Clojure.
Only Clojure.
Yes.
Okay, so Nubank uses Clojure, which is Uncle Bob Martin's favorite language. He kind of markets it, so I'm very curious if you had any kind of interaction with him. But what's really stunning here, and please comment on that, is that Nubank flat out acquired the company behind Clojure. Is that correct? So basically, Nubank now owns Clojure. I'm not trying. It's not. Yeah, I know. This might sound like a loaded question, but it's actually I'm just curious. It's not an introduction to some kind of conspiracy theory. I'm just curious if I understood that correctly. That Nubank basically acquired the language that you guys write your backend
in. We acquired the company that maintained the technology, but still, the owner is still Rich Hickey and those things. I think that didn't change, but yes, we acquired the company that was mostly maintaining the technology. So yes, in that regard, it's true.
Yeah, that's great. And from reading about, I kind of read about Nubank, and why I mentioned Elixir is because, as far as I understand, Nubank also acquired the company behind Elixir. And those of you who don't know, Elixir is yet another kind of functional language. I'm not sure it's as popular as Clojure, but it does have a decent user base and fan base. So as far as I understand, Nubank now owns the company behind Elixir as well. Is that correct?
In that regard, I think the person who actually works in Elixir like did his own company. I think so that now that other company owns Elixir, maintains Elixir, not exactly Nubank. So I think that isn't so true.
Okay, so
we acquired the company that was maintaining, but the Elixir project went to another.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. But my real question was, I mean, Elixir Clojure is very nice, but my real question was like, when Nubank will acquire the company behind Flutter then? Can you share with us any plans to acquire Google in the coming year? Okay. No, but really, it's funny. But I think there is something very interesting about the culture of a digital bank, and maybe you can comment about the culture because you live that culture of basically taking kind of cutting edge solutions. Because, well, Clojure is not exactly cutting edge solution. It has been around for a long time now, but it's still kind of unconventional choice for backend, and especially in fintech domain, right? I would expect to see some kind of Java or C# or something mature and enterprisey on your backend, but you have Clojure. And on the front end in mobile apps, you have Flutter now, and you used to have React Native. You still have React Native. And do you know what you use on the web front end side of the things?
I never remember exactly what you use on the front end.
It doesn't matter much. But I mean, the culture of bringing cutting edge technologies and using them in production, and especially, I mean, you know, there are many companies, let's say Airbnb and Lyft, which are kind of very innovative, and they kind of push forward new technologies, adopt new technologies very quickly maybe, but still, like in my maybe very limited perception, banks, even digital banks, should be a little bit different. But your bank is not. Your bank is very cutting edge. So could you please maybe tell us if there are any differences, if there are any cultural, you know, small aspects of Nubank that, first of all, make it possible, and maybe some of these cultural aspects grow from this kind of mindset of let's be cutting edge technology wise. What do you get from it as a company, as developers?
Oh, I think that one thing that helps this culture is actually letting people try new things. So Flutter started as a mob session that we had. Like, they wanted to develop a simple feature in Flutter and see how it fares in production. So letting the people have this time to, okay, let's do a mob session. Let's every once a week get together on a room and code something. Mm-hmm. Something that helps foster this innovation and trying to use new things and try to think about new things. And I think that's one of the things that helps a lot. And also having this drive to innovate, to do new things, to try new things is also something that helps us. And that's something that we foster a lot on our culture.
Yeah. Do you feel maybe think or feel, or maybe you have quantitative proof that being this company who kind of who are not afraid to take technical risks makes it easier to attract talent, to hire new developers? Because I would imagine that you're a very successful company and you grew very quickly. So the question of attracting new people, bringing new developers working is probably very central to all the decisions that you make. So do you think that being this company who adopts new technologies helps you attract new developers and retain the old ones as well? That's also a very interesting question.
I think that's something that helps, since like even working in Flutter, like it's something that people that is starting on the technology will look at the company and say, oh, there's this company that's using Flutter, so let's apply there, let's try to work there. And for engineers that are here, it's something new for you to learn, especially if you like learning new things, something new to learn and to do. And for me, it's something that for me is really cool, because like I came from a C# background, so here I had the chance to learn and work with Swift. So that's something that I didn't know before, and I had the chance to do this. So for me, it was something new that I was doing, learning. So it was a lot of new things for me to learn and to do that always keep me motivated to do my job and find new things to do. I think that helps a lot. But I don't have numbers to say how this helps or anything like that, but it's more a feeling and mostly my personal experience than anything else.
Yeah, sure. It's also very hard to quantify something like that. And Renato, maybe you can share something from your experience, how it feels to work at a company that kind of adopts all the cutting edge technologies.
But just as a compliment, as Dubas was saying, I think it's not like I know that being like these innovative, like by choosing which languages or platforms or frameworks that we are going to use. And more important than that is like the culture that we have here at Nubank. I think that's the main reason why we attract so good and talented people. That's why I came here.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell this at the beginning, but I was working for the same company for 13 years. I was very, very comfortable there. But Nubank, like at least for software engineers, I think for the other areas too, was like a dream. Like the values that we have, like how and why the company was created, the problems that we are solving every day. That's what like brings people, the best people to work here. Uh, we have like a very very person driven culture that like I never saw before in any other company. So I'm not saying that like the technology is not important, but I think that the way Nubank takes care of the employees, of the people here,
Mm-hmm.
that's what attracts people. So I think that's the main reason for the success we have today, and the success we will probably have.
Well, that's great. And maybe the last question that I wanted to ask you, kind of dig into. I read several times, in the articles of on the blog of Nubank, that you value automated testing very much. That one of even when you perform the evaluation, kind of automated testing was very much a major factor in all your decisions. And that's kind of a favorite of mine. I like automated testing. Not all of its types, but I think that, if you don't do automated testing, then you miss on something. Maybe you shouldn't have 100% coverage in all your stuff, but if you don't do it all, then you probably miss something. So maybe could you tell us a little bit about automated testing with Flutter? Like, do you write unit tests, or maybe you write mostly integration and UI tests? And how Flutter is in context of testing? Does it make it easier? Does it still suffer from some kind of being a relatively new framework for some kind of limitations? And in general, how do you do automated testing at Nubank, as a strategy and a cultural thing? Because, okay, in my opinion, like when I see a company that actually does automated testing, any kind of testing, be it unit testing or UI testing, whatever it is, it usually comes from the culture, from developers who kind of very passionate about that. It's not something, I don't believe that you can. I've been on projects where kind of management comes in and says, okay, we want to have this number of coverage. And the end result has always been a huge fiasco, disaster, basically. So could you please comment on this aspect of your professional work and how you see that, and maybe how you work with automated tests, what kind of tests you write? Oh, so that's the most difficult questions after all.
So we can write units and unit tests, like testing all the business logic of the application. And that's one part of Flutter helped us a lot, because I think Android, this wasn't a problem, but on iOS, even unit tests are run on the simulator. So you have to spin a simulator and run all the unit tests. And Flutter, you can run all those unit tests headless. So this helps us gain a lot on the CI terms. So we write those tests. We write some integration tests, so like trying to spin up a widget and go through all the flow, go through all the feature. Mm-hmm. So you used to do those tests. And like we are developing our components library. So for the components library, we even do screenshot testing. So to make sure that the component looks right independent of the size of the screen. So if you have a big screen, you render as expected. If you have a small screen, you also render as we have expected. You break the line or you show the ellipses. So we try to do tests to make us feel more secure about releasing the app. So having a lot of...
To explain a little bit more about this type of testing, because I think I understand what you mean, but just to be sure, what do you mean by, first of all, component library? That's an interesting term. What's component library? And then this specific type of testing, what's actually happens? What's the test?
So a components library is what we call the design system. So we're developing the design system, so every feature can use it and make it easier for them to develop.
And cross-platform UI elements, would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. So, and since it's Flutter, like we have all the components are being written, all the UI components are being written in Flutter, and this makes it easier. And this screenshot testing is basically, write the test, you run it to take all the screenshots that you need, like taking the screenshot of the button component small, the button component big, and all the variations. And even the button component small with a high accessibility label. So you have the accessibility text set on max. So you have the button with a really big text. So we developed this test. So run to take all the screenshots. These screenshots are committed on the repository, and when the CI runs this test, it will compare the screenshot that has been taken during the test with the screenshot that is the golden, what we expect the screenshot to be, and see if they are recall or if there are some changes on the screenshot.
So you basically use some kind of a tool that performs actual visual comparison of two screenshots, and this tool can identify diffs. And if there is a big diff, I'm sure there's some kind of a sensitivity metric that you don't want to fail on each pixel. But if a difference is big enough, then you want to know about that, and then probably a human should either tell that, okay, that's a bug and we need to fix that, or that's the desired outcome, and now this new screenshot becomes the golden reference.
Yes.
Something
And
along those
yes, and one of the best things that Flutter has is out of the box. So you have this golden image testing out of the box, and that's something that really helped us. And we didn't have so many troubles with writing testing.
lines.
For us, out of the box, this was available for us in Flutter. I don't know if Renato has any different experience with this, but for me,
No, just a compliment of what you were saying. I think like having this culture of writing tests, it's very very important. It's like mandatory at Nubank because we don't have QAs, we don't have testers.
Oh, you
So
don't have QA at all?
no, zero.
Oh, that's an interesting.
So
Okay,
yes,
I
like
hope
we
guys,
are.
you're free for the next hour, because I would like to dig into that.
So we are kind of responsible for everything that's being like delivered to the user. So like people used to like joke about saying, you guys are just testing in production. Like it helps
Yeah,
sometimes. Of course, we are software engineers. We sometimes we add some kind of bug on the system, but I think that it's creating tests, creating the right tests is very important here because brings uh, this sense of we are doing a great job because like today I'm not sure about the amount of tests, but I'm pretty sure that's only on mobile we have more than 40K tests.
yeah,
So, so there is a lot of tests. We had like to make a lot of optimizations on our CI. We have a specific squad to do that, just to make sure that we are running the right tests when like some portions of the code are changed or modified. So imagine like running 40K, 50K tests every time someone like merges a pull request to the.
yeah. I
It would
actually,
be
I
like
actually
crazy.
has an experience with that, because I used to work in hardware before I became mobile developer, and there we built this system on chip, which is basically a huge mess, and everything should have been tested, because like the cost of a mistake when you send something to fabrication chip wise and you discover that you made a bug, the cost can be like in tens of millions. And there's this lithography process, and like I mean, sometimes post production, like when you send something to fab and it comes back and there is a bug, there's really like 100 people can be involved in solving this one single bug. It's as bad as that. So everything was tested, and I remember that when you kind of you change two lines of code, wait for 2 hours for all the tests to complete, and then you try to push it into the main repo, and you discover that someone meanwhile pushed something else, so you have a merge conflict, and you need to start. And basically, it wasn't like that that rare that you pushed 2 lines of code for a day. That was your day job, to kind of commit 2 lines of code in the main repo. So yeah, but on the flip side, you don't have QA. Well, I just don't. We agreed for a conversation of 1 hour, and this topic alone deserved like an hour of its own. But that's something I'm really interested in. It's impressive because QA is a major cost factor in software projects, and if you can like bring the culture of testing to the point where you can reasonably still like say, okay, we're reasonably confident in the quality of what we have, and we don't need QA. So that's a huge benefit. Like, I mean, it's a huge amount of money spared, because QA, they just like, they don't scale. You can delete the smallest change in something, and you need to perform manual regression of all these tests, and it still can take a week. So compared to a week, even 2 hours to wait for the tests is not that big. So that's definitely something that I'm very I'm like sitting here like, whoa, I want to dig into that, but I think that would be very unfair for you. So maybe maybe you would just, if you have something to promote, I don't know, yourself, your products, or maybe you hired Nubank, because I know that some people from Brazil, they kind of follow me, and maybe if you hire and you would like to invite them to submit their resumes. So
Just we are hiring. I think that's the biggest, the most important thing. We need people. Like probably as any other company, we lack in very good people, in very good engineers. We have like open seats for other like functions within the company, but engineers is something that we are lacking. So apply for us. I don't remember this website. Maybe Dubas remembers. Uh, but if you like want to work in a place that will be like very valuable and that is changing the way like the financial world works, that's Nubank.
yeah. Do you hire like entry-level developers, or you prefer to hire like more experienced ones?
I think we have open space for any kind of levels. I'm not sure exactly now what open,
Yeah, sure, of course.
but
But I mean, it's like for someone who just enters the workforce, someone who just search for first or second position in the industry, working at a company who does that amount of automated testing is like outstanding, outstanding opportunity. Because I think I'm very privileged, because I came from hardware, and when I transferred to software, for me, automated testing was like, it wasn't even a question. It's like, it was just understand how you do that. It took time, of course. But yeah, for folks, if you watch that and you are an Android or iOS or whatever developer, and you live in Brazil, or maybe you have offices outside of Brazil as well.
yes, we have.
Yes.
Go ahead.
We have offices in Germany, Mexico, and Argentina. So
If you live in
from one of those
Mexico,
places.
Germany, Argentina, or Brazil, I highly recommend that you just apply to Nubank, because when you come to Israel, you will get my resume as well.
And actually, even if you're outside of these
You mean-
countries, you
I'm
can
not sure
also
about
send.
the numbers, but I think we have
Open.
like 27 countries. So like
Yeah.
you don't actually need to be one of those local sites. So
Wow, that's a okay. I need to take a look at my own resume, see if it's up to date. Well, gentlemen, it was real pleasure. It was an hour, but for me it felt like 15 minutes. I barely scratched the topics that I wanted to discuss with you. I really appreciate the time that you gave us. I think your experience is very important. Again, I don't want to dive into my own conspiracy theories, but I do feel that the future of mobile development is cross-platform. And I know that we've been saying that for the past 10 years, but at this point, I think that it's actually something that will happen. So your experience with Flutter and how you feel about it, that's definitely something that many people will be very interested in. So thank you very much for sharing with us these details, and it was really interesting conversation. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you a lot.
Yeah. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Bye. You too.
Bye bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.